First is from Unisource Canada is Andrew Gustyn, and I'm going to do a little more introduction in a moment. And then Robert Boutin from Canada Post and Brad Chittick from Canadian Tire. So, it's great to see so many people here tonight, especially, now that we actually have good weather. But, the logistics sector is doing a really good job of supply chain and logistics at Going Green. We released our Greening the Supply Chain research report a few years ago. And I'm proud to say that as we continue to work with project partners in Project Green, we're finding more and more of our Canadian companies are doing this, even in the educational field. Tonight, if you see at the back of the room, there's a brochure for them. We have a SCL-led Master's Certificate in Supply Chain and Logistics Management at York University's Schulich School of Business. What's good about this, by the way, is if you took this Master's Certificate, normally in the past you would have, every module, you'd have got 2 great big binders, so there used to be 16 binders. This year it's an iPad, so I think it's a great step forward in the green movement. So I hope you take home a copy of our brochure, because it's a super course in today's modern, ever-changing supply chain management practices. And I think as well, those of you who are here tonight that might be joining us from outside the logistics sector, you have a lot to gain from our conversation tonight as well. Usually a challenge that's seen in one industry is a challenge that is being felt across the board. So, again, thank you for coming. And while the opportunities are great, it can sometimes be a challenge to navigate sustainability path, which is why conversations such as the one we're going to have here tonight are so valuable. Here's your opportunity to learn from those who have already been implementing projects and plans, taking advantage of the lessons learned and the successes gained, and can drive sustainability deeper, faster, and cheaper into their own organization. Therefore, I'm pleased to present to you tonight 3 leaders in the industry who are also taking the lead on organizational sustainability through innovative technologies and practices. So I'm going to introduce the 3 of you first, and then we'll move into the panel portion. Andrew Gustyn is from Unisource Canada. And just to give you, so you'll know, Unisource is Canada's leading marketer and distributor of paper to the commercial print market. Oh, gee, I shouldn't have told you about that. As well as packaging and facility supplies to the grocery, food service, property management, and green manufacturing sectors. Unisource operates out of 20 facilities across our country, employing more than 1,200 people. Unisource has earned a reputation as a leader in promoting sustainability in the print industry, and was the first Canadian distributor to acquire all 3 chain of custody certificates: Forest Stewardship Council, Sustainability Forestry Initiative, and Program for the Endorsement of Forestry Certificate, as well as twice winning silver at the Environmental Print Awards. So as you can see, Unisource, this is a great company, and their goal, they intend to be the environmental partner of choice for their clients across Canada. So Andrew himself is Unisource Canada's Corporate Sustainability Manager, a very important position. And prior to taking on the CSR role, Andrew was the National Marketing Manager, Packaging for Unisource Canada. He lives in Ottawa, which, by the way, their team didn't make the playoffs either. And,
which is why we have a free night.
He has a BA in Economics and an MBA in International Business, both from McGill University. So thank you, Andrew, for being here.
Thanks, Bob.
Now I'd like to introduce Robert Boutin from Canada Post. Everybody knows Canada Post, of course, but what you might not know is they have over 60,000 employees in our country. And there are close to 6,500 post offices. And Canada Post is one of Canada's biggest employers, obviously. It maintains the largest retail network in the country, operates one of the largest vehicle fleets with more than 7,000 vehicles. In 2010, Canada Post delivered 10.6 billion pieces of mail. I think a lot of those were bills to my husband for my wife's online shopping. Parcels, messages, to more than 15 million addresses across our country. Canada Post recently introduced a number of changes to ensure that they can meet the changing face of their business, redefine their future, and meet their customers' needs. They are introducing a new, more efficient mail delivery model to to much of their network and are also modernizing their entire mail sorting infrastructure. Sustainability considerations were taken into account in every major decision around this initiative, from more ergonomic work environments, LEED buildings, and the purchase of fuel-efficient delivery vehicles. In fact, we just launched a new website on behalf of NRCan at SCL, and you can go into there and see all the different programs that have been launched through the government initiatives and the like, but Canada Post is featured on there as one of the companies, and you can see ideas and people who are doing certain things in the environmental field. And Robert has been with Canada Post for over 10 years. He was responsible for initiating the CSR program at Canada Post 4 years ago, and is the Senior Advisor, Corporate Social Responsibility. Robert holds his MBA from the University of Ottawa, and he's a member of the Conference Board of Canada's Business Council for Sustainability, and of course here the partners in Project Green Sustainable Logistics Consortium. Welcome, Robert. Our next panelist is from Canadian Tire, Brad Chittick. I guess all of us know the tire. I mean, how could you ever, tools, like with Christmas, that's the only place I shop because my boys even buy my grandkids tools, so it's a great, we all know Canadian Tire and sponsoring hockey and the like, so Canadian Tire is a network of interrelated businesses that are engaged not only in retail but financial services, petroleum, employing over 48,000 Canadians. So here's another company we often forget how many employees across Canada are employed through Canadian Tire's operations. And of course they have 455 stores. They have a parts source automotive parts specialty chain with 47 stores. They have the Canadian Financial Services, their Canadian Tire Petroleum that has over 250 gas bars, and if you look at the 401, I believe all the new ones are Canadian Tire. And Mark's Work Warehouse with over 325 stores. And Canadian Tire has 3 aspirational goals connected to its sustainability initiatives. Grow the business without increasing the net carbon footprint of the economy. Eliminate unnecessary packaging while sending zero waste to the landfills, and provide innovative product and services that meet their customer needs without compromising future generations, which is great for someone like me who has 4 grandchildren. Canadian Tire is among the first major Canadian companies to report quarterly on its efforts, reflecting the integration of sustainability into its daily operations and aligning environmental and profit performances. In the third quarter of 2010, Canadian Tire announced that 89 sustainability projects have been completed, bringing the total number of projects in sustainability in 2010 to 203. That's a huge number. Congratulations. These 203 business sustainability initiatives were completed between January and September and are forecasted to help Canadian Tire avoid using approximately 71,400 gigajoules, that word even means, of energy and prevent 3,700 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 equivalent, each year. This is really remarkably, this is huge. I let in more goals in my professional hockey career than this. And Canadian Tire savings are equivalent to the energy that we would use and the greenhouse gas that would be emitted from powering 675 Canadian homes for a year. So that's remarkable. It's a remarkable achievement. And Canadian Tire's environmental community involvement includes sponsorships for local environmental projects, National Waste Reduction Week, and Pollution Probe's Clean Air Commute, as well as being a participant in Canada's Climate Change Voluntary Challenge and Registry, and NRCan's Energy Efficient Innovators Initiative, which again you can see on our SEO website. Now a little bit about Brad. Brad Chittick is the Associate Vice President of Supply Chain Facilities and Maintenance for Canadian Tire Retail. He is responsible for the maintenance, engineering, environmental, and non-merchandise procurement activities for CTC supply chain facilities across Canada. He has been with Canadian Tire for over 19 years in engineering, operational, and project management positions throughout his career. He has led the operation of a 1.4 million square foot distribution center in Brampton, Ontario. And prior to his current position, He led the project team that designed, built, and successfully implemented the 1.5 million square foot DC in the greater Montreal area, which I had the pleasure of touring at an SCL event. So again, very modern. The Montreal DC is their largest distribution center. And prior, like 14 years ago, Brad was in the automotive manufacturing sector. He employs a Bachelor of Engineering Science degree from the University of Western Ontario, so I like that, it's my alma mater. And he's a registered professional engineer in Ontario, so I hope you'll join me in welcoming our three panelists, because they're very great. I think the key here is to see not only are they great companies, but they're great individuals who really hold a lot of responsibility, and all of them can sit here and talk all night about what each of them and their companies have achieved. So I think that's a remarkable achievement. So if I will, I'm going to ask Andrew the first question to start the ball rolling. Andrew, many organizations are recognizing the need to move towards operating sustainably. And there are many different approaches to greening the business. Can you discuss your approach to operating your business in a more sustainable manner?
Thanks, Bob. And actually, thanks, Chris, Jennifer, for having us here. You know, the basic premise as to why we've engaged in the activities we've actually engaged in are driven towards developing a legitimate foundation to the products that we end up selling, giving ourselves a pulpit from which we can actually communicate sustainable solutions to our customer base. So that's the basic premise of why we've ended up moving forward in the way that we have. There are three basic pillars that we've ended up engaging in terms of how we affect the environmental and social footprint of our organization. The first one is focusing on reducing the impact of our operations. The second one is focused on sourcing issues. And the third one is focused on employee engagement. So in the first area, in terms of minimizing the impact of our operations, I mean, some of the things that we've ended up doing are, quite frankly, none of them are really rocket science. And I'm sure that many of you have ended up engaging in similar activities. We've outfitted virtually all of our vehicles with vehicle monitoring systems so that we can actually optimize what speeds they drive at and minimize the amount of time that they end up spending idling. We have routing software that optimizes the actual path that they end up traveling along, making deliveries to the various locations and customers that we end up servicing. Through Partners in Project Green, we've actually aggressively pursued lighting retrofits through a great number of our facilities, and that's had a massive impact on the energy footprint of our locations. From a sourcing perspective, we need to ensure that we provide clean, clear, concise product information to our customers and ensure that the sources that we're actually getting the products from are seamless and transparent. And so we've actively engaged in a process by which we try to end up getting great third-party certification with regards to all the products that we end up selling. But furthermore, we actively engage in a process of evaluating the vendors that we actually utilize on similar programs to what we end up engaging in, so that at least we're partnering with people who have similar goals and aspirations that we do. And in the last part, when we deal with employee engagement, we've actually tasked our employees with changing the corporate culture within our organization and hopefully actually get them to be part of the solution. So we've actively pursued creating these organizations called SWAT teams, or Sustainable Workplace Through Action and Teamwork teams. And we give them particular problems to end up solving. Some that are focused on environmental issues, some that are focused on creating social awareness. So to give you an example, we have a SWAT team here in the Greater Toronto area that's worked actively in terms of working around waste diversion. We have one facility here that has a waste diversion rate around 85 to 90%. So that means that 85 to 90% of the waste that actually ends up being created in that facility, whether it be organic or inorganic, gets diverted into a recycling stream or another. The stuff that we can't end up diverting is typically stuff like pallets and whatnot that really doesn't have an active market for. Even then, we try to end up finding places to move that. They're also the spearhead that's engaged with regards to a lot of philanthropic and charitable organizations at the grassroots level, whether it be United Way, our involvement with the Scouts Trees program, or even for that matter in terms of the tree planting campaigns that we've engaged with Partners in Project Green. So those are the three basic elements and the strategies that we've ended up utilizing to move our projects forward.
Well, thank you. I really liked hearing how the employees have bought in and are a major part of this. That's really good. Thank you. Robert, Canada Post has recently undertaken the modernization of its operations and its fleet. Can you tell us what drove the decision-making process to include sustainable vehicle options and how you operationalize this program?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me as well, and thanks, Bob, for the introduction. It's great to be here tonight. And before I answer your question directly, how many of you are familiar with the transformation that's happening at Canada Post, the modernization of our delivery model? Maybe just a show of hands. Okay, so just before I answer that, what I'll do is I'll just give you a brief overview of what's happening. Actually, Canada Post is now going through probably the greatest transformation in how it actually processes the mail and delivers the mail in its history. It's also going through the biggest investment it's ever made. It's a $2 billion investment that touches virtually all aspects of our business. And what happened was 5-6 years ago, the CEO at the time and the senior executives looked at the company and saw a number of challenges that they needed to face. And the first challenge was our infrastructure. It was an aging infrastructure. It was old. The CEO at the time used to call it state-of-the-art infrastructure. Literally, people had to actually go and buy pieces on eBay to fix our machines because nobody would service them anymore. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge was an aging workforce. Still, to this day, the average age of the Canada Post employee is around 49 years old. Same for the letter carriers. So with an aging workforce, obviously, comes many challenges. Attrition is one. We're expecting to lose 60% of our workforce in the next 10 years. And also, obviously, if a letter carrier is around 50 years old, they're more prone to fall, more prone to have ergonomics-related issues as well. So we needed to solve that issue. The third thing was also the way we deliver the mail. In any of your neighborhoods now, on any given day, you might have 4 or 5 different employees from Canada Post doing various tasks in your neighborhood. The first one is obviously going to be the letter carrier delivering your mail. There's going to be maybe another truck delivering a parcel, yet another one going to pick up mail from a street letterbox, yet another one delivering mail to these gray relay boxes on every street. And so there was potential for a lot of improvement on that side as well, and consolidating a lot of these routes. And finally, at that time as well, there was a lot of pressure from our customers and from our employees as well to green Canada Post and to become a more sustainable organization as well. And so these challenges, I guess, were analyzed and converged into a project that we call Postal Transformation. And through Postal Transformation, what we've been able to do is first reinvest money that was desperately needed in our infrastructure, in our plants, to buy new machines. So that was no brain surgery, but we needed to do that. So by providing our letter carriers with small fuel-efficient vehicles, what we're able to do is to actually ask them to perform a lot of the tasks that used to be performed by a lot of other employees. And our goal is to have a smaller workforce, but that's going to be done without any layoffs. So it's just through normal attrition through the years. We're going to capitalize on this normal attrition that's going to happen through retirement. So the typical day of a letter carrier in the past was spending a lot of time at a letter carrier depot, sorting the mail in the morning for every address, picking up the mail, putting it in their bag, and walking on their way. Actually, very often taking a taxi to go to their route, coming back at lunch to their letter carrier depot by taxi, going back in the afternoon and back at night. So there was wasted money and wasted, obviously, environmental impact there as well. So now, with the new machinery, we're actually going to sequence the mail a lot faster and a lot better in the morning so that everything for the letter carrier route is actually going to be pre-sorted for them. So they spend a lot less time in their depot and a lot more time on the road. And so providing vehicles with two letter carriers sounds a bit counterintuitive when you think of sustainability. But in fact, when you take into consideration the fact that one individual is going to be doing the task of 4 or 5, you can quickly see where that will have a net positive or negative, if you want to call it that, environmental impact, because we're going to be reducing the number of kilometers, reducing this unnecessary what we call employee conveyance by taxi to the routes and back. We're going to be reducing the number of accidents, because I think the social aspect of this transformation are probably as important, or not more important, than the environmental aspects of this transformation. So that's another thing that we're going to do with this. And it's also going to allow us to capitalize on opportunities that we didn't have in the past. If a letter carrier has a vehicle instead of walking a route, all of a sudden we can perhaps think of all kinds of new services that we can launch by doing that. And maybe they can start collecting parcels instead of just delivering mail, for example. So we're going through this postal transformation as we speak now, and obviously we're still going through that, and there are still a few unknowns. But overall, it's a very positive story, because we're going to be improving our social impact, improving our environmental performance, and achieving approximately $250 million of savings on an annual basis through this postal transformation. And you asked how it was sort of implemented. I think I talked a bit about the leadership at the time. Obviously, none of this is possible without a clear vision and a lot of forward thinking at the top, at the very top. So at CEO, at executive level, there was a lot of thinking going on, and a lot of sort of willingness to do things the right way on the environmental front and social front. So that was one key element. There's also a huge team that's responsible for actually developing it and implementing it. We've got, probably upwards of 150 to 200 individuals just focused on that initiative. It's a big change management exercise, probably almost unequaled at that scale. It touches tens of thousands of employees, and logistically, it's quite an undertaking. And that's done by, obviously, people that are a lot smarter than I am, a lot of Six Sigma black belts, and people that can really get a process down pat, and people, obviously, as well on the communication side. The engagement of our employees behind this initiative is extremely important. So finally, what happened for this implementation is a lot of engagement with our customers, customer panels, and employee consultations and consultations with the unions to make sure that we were getting our solutions right, but also to make sure that they were engaged behind that initiative. Because without that, it's never going to happen. So that's sort of in a nutshell what's going on.
Well, that's great, Robert. Again, you can see where, with the right leadership, and you've got the employees to buy in. What's interesting about Canada Post is you have such an aging workforce, and to get them to buy in, I know people, when you get my age, it's a little hard to buy into some things. It reminds me in my own life, at my cottage, I would always take my grandkids and kids out to see the bears. Well, now my grandkids I have so many different bins for different, recycling that the bears are at our place. It's kind of neat at night. I just open the window and say, "Look, kids, there's the bears."
Yeah, we don't think of Canada Post typically as something that's dangerous. Delivering the mail, we think it should be fairly safe. But we have approximately 4,000 accidents, lost time accidents a year, and our accident rate is around 6 per 100 employees. So if any of you work in the health and safety area, you'll know that that's much higher than most industries, even the mining industry. So it's quite surprising for most people, but if we can get a handle on that, there are obviously healthier employees and a lot of cost savings as well.
My dog's only bit the mailman 8 times.
Stop delivering his mail.
Thanks, Robert. Brad, Canadian Tire, you've undertaken some pretty innovative projects to ensure long-term sustainability and economic goals. Could you share with us some of the best practices for delivering long-term results where you're aligning that
corporate citizenship goal with the economic drivers?
When our Vice President of Sustainability found out that I was coming to speak here, he approached me, he handed me a 40-page PowerPoint presentation, said, "Brad, here, talk about this." So I do have some good points that he brought up in terms of best practices, and it really isn't that much different than any other large change in direction or change in thinking that you might want to implement in a company. We've talked for a long time about it starting from the top. It does start from the top. One of the most important thing is that sustainability can't be viewed as just an environmental issue. It has to be a business strategy. You've got to engage it in your business as a strategy. And for profit-seeking companies, it's really very important to align that with that mandate. The mandate to be profitable. Make sure it's economical for you. So it's making good business sense as well as doing the right thing for the environment. Bob talked about one of Canadian Tire's aspirations along this way, and it's the carbon footprint of the economy. Not just the carbon footprint of the company, but the carbon footprint of the economy. That to us means that as a retail business, we believe that we have a farther reaching opportunity outside of the borders of our retail operation. And an example of that is our focus on waste. Well, our focus on waste is not just the waste produced in our facilities, it's also the waste that we create by the product that we sell. So particularly, and you heard Andrew talk about it, particularly packaging. So taking a very innovative look at how you package things, how your packaging, where your packaging ends up in the cradle-to-cradle aspect is very important. All of that has to be driven by the framework that you set up in terms of your business strategy. Second point is really understanding the value that's derived from what you're doing, from the projects that you're undertaking. This one's a tricky one, I think, because this one is about changing the way you think about value. So value can be derived not only by the innovation itself that you're trying to create, but also by the process that you go through to innovate. The knowledge that you gain, and the experience that you get from that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. I'm sorry if it gets a little bit long, but many of you may have heard some of our advertisements about the Goodyear Allegra tire that we've been recently selling and advertising. That it gets about 4% more mileage on the tire, or less fuel consumption, which equates to the life of the tire about being 4,000 miles in the life of the tire. So we worked with Goodyear directly on helping to develop that product. However, we're marketing it not in terms of the reduction of greenhouse gas, which it would have if it reduces fuel by 4% in your average travel, but we're marketing it as a savings to Canadian consumers. And so that of course is driving, we hope, will drive business into Canadian Tire and make us a little bit more profitable. So good for the customer, good for the environment, good for our business. So that's one example. And then if you extend that thinking in terms of tires, well, what ends up happening to a tire at the end of its life? Well, it goes into a scrap heap somewhere. And there's been certainly a lot more focus on what to do with recycled tires. There are about 33 million tires per year that are scrapped in Canada. 11 million of them come from Ontario. So the Ontario Stewardship Program now is collecting about 11 million tires a year. What are we going to do with all of those? So we started to think about innovative products that perhaps we could use, that we use scrap tire. And so I think last winter we introduced car mats that were made from recycled tires. And so every pair of car mat takes up about one tire. So for every pair of car mats that we sell, we take one tire out of the environment, out of the landfill. So again, an opportunity for profit and an opportunity for using a waste stream for another purpose. The other good thing about it is when the car mat's finished, you can throw it back into the rubber waste stream, and we'll make another car mat out of it. So it somewhat perpetuates itself as well. But the logistics piece around that is very interesting, because we're sourcing tires from Ontario and we're selling it to one of our largest markets in Canada, in Ontario. And so we chose a manufacturer in Ontario, a manufacturer that's in Concord, actually. So we're sourcing them locally. we're manufacturing them locally, and we're distributing them rather locally. Of course, we sell them across Canada, but Ontario is a very large customer base for us. So we've actually reduced the footprint for transportation, the logistics footprint, in that one example. So thinking innovatively, not only about the end use of the product and how to create the product and how to use the waste stream, also derives things like those logistic opportunities. Well, what does that do for us overall as a company? It reduces cost. So again, reducing greenhouse gases, reducing costs. So those are two examples of how you can start to think about the value of a sustainability initiative. And finally, the third point, I think, the most important point for me is creating that sustainability thinking into the business culture, really integrating it into the business culture. How do you do that? Well, you do it by continuing to break down silos. Now, I think most companies today don't work in a lot of silos. We learned those lessons in the 70s and the 80s. But however, you still have areas of expertise and opportunity, and you need to share that across the areas of your company. And so in Canadian Tire, we created a number of network committees. And I belong to one network committee that focuses on facilities, focuses on innovative approaches to retrofitting facilities, maintaining facilities, and building new facilities. And I'm currently working on a project to introduce hydrogen fuel cells into our lift truck fleet in one of our distribution centers. And my greatest challenge in this project was making the project hurdle, making it economically viable. There is absolutely no government assistance for introducing hydrogen power into the locomotive devices such as lift trucks. In the U.S., they get lots of assistance, and companies can make it economically viable based on the grants and loans that they get. But in Canada, we don't have any. So we had to start to think about an innovative way of making this business case work. And how I got there was through a number of these committees, talking to folks in the committees about the project and gaining their thoughts about how to approach it. And again, it was thinking about it more broadly. And so the answer, I can't reveal the total answer, but the answer is we're actually going to produce our own hydrogen on site. And we're going to, and that's going to reduce some of our costs of acquisition of hydrogen, but we're going to do some other innovative things along with hydrogen that I'm sorry I just can't divulge at this point in time. That has made the business case very attractive. Attractive enough that there are other business opportunities for Canadian Tire that are spinning out of this project. So again, thinking about it more broadly, thinking about not just the environmental issue, but thinking about how sustainability can impact outside of either your internal borders in your area of expertise, but also outside of your business.
Well, that was very interesting, especially the end of length of the tires. I had a question in terms of thinking about when you mentioned about your employees. How do you engage your employees to help you reach your sustainability goals?
I think that's a fairly, for me at least, it's a fairly simple answer. It is always harder to implement, but it's a fairly simple answer, and that's because employees want to be engaged, particularly in things that have social impact, particularly in things that they talk about in their homes with their families. Every one of you mentioned earlier, we're recycling. We teach our children about the importance of recycling. So our children are growing up understanding those things. So employees want to be engaged. You need to clearly set your goals and your direction and your aspirations with your employees. They need to understand where you're going. They need to start to understand about the strategy that you set forth and about how to think about it differently. You've got to give them a lot of direction. You also need to give them the support. If we're going to ask our employees to go out and be creative and think about ways they can do things better either in their workplace or how their workplace impacts the environment, they need support. So like Andrew said, you need to develop some think tanks with employees. You need to allow them to grow some ideas, and then you need to give them the support to go out and implement them. But you need to make sure they're targeted and they're directed so that those ideas are supporting your strategy, and that's very important. So that's what we are doing.
Oh, thank you.
Can I add to that though? That's vital because when we initially created our SWAT teams, our sustainability teams, the challenge that we ran into inevitably was that they have a lot of enthusiasm behind whatever initiative they're looking to end up undertaking. Those initiatives don't always end up falling in line with corporate objectives, which is sometimes a bit of a problem. And the other challenge, though, is that they sometimes run out of gas really, really quickly once they realize that they're kind of running against some of these frameworks. And so really, the success that we've ended up seeing has been to actually provide them with a little bit of structure. Providing with them with the necessary tools and giving them the freedom to be able to work creatively, but also giving them some parameters in which to work with and actually provide them with some goals that they can aspire to.
That's good, thank you. Maybe Andrew, you could just tell us about how do you, at Unisource, how do you approach your supply chain to provide sustainability products to your clients, and what are some of the challenges? Maybe you can tell us some of the challenges in your supply chain.
So I don't know how familiar any of you are within our organization, but Bob alluded to the fact that we're fairly ensconced in the print industry, and we have three primary product segments to our business. One of them is fine paper. The second is what we call facility supplies, and for lack of a better term, in the common nomenclature would be Jansan products. And the third one is in packaging. On the fine paper side, I think product information, from our perspective, we've built a hierarchy of availability to our customers, and we try to communicate those product attributes to our customers as clearly, as concisely, and trying to avoid any potential opportunities for greenwashing. So at the really greenest possible opportunity outside of not using paper, and I really took offense at that iPad comment. We provide solutions that are 100% post-consumer recycled content, but then we go further than that. We really try to provide our customers with opportunities to look at manufacturing standards that are incorporated into how that paper is manufactured, whether it uses renewable energy in the process, is it process chlorine-free, and of course then the standards that everybody ends up seeing, which are chain of custody. I don't know, everybody familiar with chain of custody here? No? So chain of custody, there are three basic standards that have become pervasive within the industry: FSC, SFI, and PEFC. Those three standards, in effect, enable an individual buyer, whether it be a printer or yourself, to look at a piece of printed material and realize that the source fiber that came into manufacturing that paper came from a sustainably harvested forest. The premise behind it is that you can actually end up tracing the fiber throughout the manufacturing process and throughout the supply chain till its inevitable conclusion, which is generally something that will end up sitting on your table. So you can trace it from the forest floor through to the pulping process, through to the point where it's actually manufactured into paper and then converted and printed on. As far as fine paper goes, there are some other elements that we're starting to see end up developing. Life cycle analysis is starting to become an issue with some customers, and we're actively engaged in providing LCAs on some of the paper products that we end up selling. And lastly, it stems from legitimate sourcing or legality of sourcing. Just to give you a frame of reference, only about 10% of the world's forests are actually harvested from sustainably harvested sources. So that leaves a very large portion of the paper fiber that's available out there that doesn't really come from any particular source that is sustainably harvested, or for that matter, hasn't been certified necessarily. So we've actively engaged in a process by which we actually now ask for information from our paper manufacturers in and around where is the source fiber coming from, specifically species information, so that we can at least end up understanding that A, it may not come from a contentious source, or B, for that matter, it may not come from an endangered species. So that's how we end up handling the paper world. Our Jansan products and how we go about communicating information there, we've been fairly lucky in that both the Canadian and the US Green Building Councils have established standards with regards to building operations, LEED EBOM, LEED existing building operations and maintenance, which in effect create meta standards by which People can end up referencing what can be used with respects to green cleaning operations, towel and tissue, cleaning chemicals, down to garbage can liners. Standards that you're probably most familiar with, like Eco Logo and Green Seal. We have a good frame of reference with regards to the products that we end up selling in there. Packaging is a little bit more difficult, because quite frankly, packaging is not so much associated with the issue of sourcing, although that does come into play, and you do end up getting sustainably harvested wood fiber that comes into the manufacturing of things like corrugated and the like. Really, the issue with regards to packaging comes down to a matter of disposal. It's how do you end up getting rid of this thing, and what actually ends up happening with that particular product once it ends up either in a blue box or, for that matter, in a potential landfill. And that's a real issue. I'll give you an example of something that you're probably most familiar with, and then kind of illustrate an example of something that occurred. You're all familiar with PepsiCo's Sun Chips bag that they ended up putting out on the market, and then they were pulled off the market. The product itself is perfectly viable. The allegation was that it was a particularly noisy bag, and the process that they ended up establishing for determining that the product is biodegradable was solid. The science was there. The challenge was that the product that they were utilizing was not necessarily biodegradable under the conditions which you typically end up seeing, and not many municipalities end up having biodegradability facilities. From a corporate end user perspective, in terms of the logistics environment, we sell stretch film. You probably guys all end up using stretch film. There is an oxo-degradable stretch film that's available out on the market, but quite frankly, I don't know anybody, who would actually go out and actively end up composting this stuff. So in that particular scenario, you're probably paying a premium for a product that you don't have a real end-of-life solution around. So increasingly, rather than looking, we've been looking towards our vendors to provide us with necessary input and insight, but we've also been challenging our sellers to actually engage with our customers to look at solutions, and rather than try to provide really off-the-wall types of solutions, we've been trying to end up focusing them much more on simple solutions, which is reduction, which is really about the only ultimate way that you can actually end up affecting change with regards to how much packaging you're using. So we're increasingly focusing our people towards trying to use thinner and thinner gauge materials if possible, and try to end up engaging them with customers to actually use much more efficient systems by which to actually end up using packaging.
Thank you. Very interesting. Robert, you were talking earlier, you kind of boast a lot of environmental initiatives. How do you set the priorities to do this?
No, it's a very good question. We have obviously very limited resources internally, like in any company, and we have to focus on what matters the most. And I think we use a fairly standard process in that first we look at the impact of our operations, and we conducted a life cycle analysis and looked at the various impacts of our business. And so that was one thing, the first thing we looked at. So how material is all of our different processes and impacts. The second thing, obviously, is to listen to all of our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, our suppliers, etc., and just pay a lot of attention to what matters to them. You want to make sure that you're addressing their concerns as well, not just looking at it from a purely scientific point of view on the impact standpoint. So what you do then is you combine these two and you look at the sweet spot and making sure that you focus on areas that are both of high impact for your company and high interest for all of your stakeholders. And so what Counterpost has done is focused in 3 or 4 main areas. The first one being carbon emissions. So we knew that was extremely important for our customers, for our suppliers, for our employees, etc. So we wanted to really focus on this, and obviously transportation is one of our major ways of trying to reduce our impacts. So testing alternative fuel and buying fuel-efficient vehicles was one way. Also consolidating routes is another, as I explained before. We also own Purilators, so we're leveraging that partnership to try and look for synergies there as well to reduce our flight time for a lot of our routes. So carbon emissions was the first one. The second one was built buildings as well. We have 60,000 employees, as you pointed out in the introduction, and having a work environment that is pleasant, healthy as well. We have a lot of complaints from employees, for example, on air quality. They process a lot of mail internally. There's a lot of dust, and we wanted to make sure that our new models would have a lot better air quality as well. And that's just one element of obviously all the benefits of having LEED buildings. So today we have 17 buildings registered for LEED certification. We only started that sort of commitment to have all of our new buildings registered for LEED certification about 4 years ago. So we already have 17 new buildings that are LEED registered and 2 that are certified silver. And the biggest one of them is the sort of model facility that we will be using throughout our postal transformation in Winnipeg that just opened in June last year. So it's an immense mail processing facility, and we're hoping to get LEED certification soon on that building. So that was the second one. And finally, also waste diversion is very important. We want to make sure that our buildings are as green as possible, and I think that's sort of probably the first thing that most companies will look at as well, is making sure that they have an efficient system to manage their waste. We're actually part of a subgroup within Partners in Project Green called the Zero Waste Special Interest Group, and we're hoping to learn a lot from that and to implement better measures within our plants to green our buildings.
Fascinating. Thank you. Andrew, if I could just come back to you. You've been involved in Partners in Project Green right from the very start. Maybe you could just tell us a bit how you leverage their programs for your sustainability projects.
Have we actually been involved from the very start? I guess.
As will my notes say.
As your notes say.
Yep.
I would suggest we have been involved with PPG quite early on, and I mean we've been very lucky in the fact we've been actually able to leverage that particular partnership through a number of ways. I hate to use this analogy, but I'm going to sound like the guy who shills for the hair club for men. I mean, we're not only people who end up utilizing Partners in Project Green, but we're actually service providers to Partners in Project Green, in fact. So, I mean, our lighting initiatives, for instance, were initiated by an eco audit that we had conducted as a result of our belonging to PPG, and that initially uncovered some potential opportunities to impact their environmental footprint, specifically as it related to our energy consumption, to one of our facilities here in the GTA in Mississauga. And then as a result of uncovering that potential opportunity, we were able to partner with PPG and their purchasing consortium, the Clinton Climate Initiative, and it resulted in an introduction to the folks at Armstrong, Sylvania, which resulted in us having design work done and several proposals that had been tabled with regards to a lighting retrofit for initially this one particular facility in Mississauga. And since then, that has expanded to virtually covering all of our 3 GTA facilities. I'm trying to think how many more that we've actually ended up retrofitting as a result of this process. I think there are about 5 other facilities that have been undertaken as a result of it. And to give you a kind of scope of this, just the 3 facilities in the GTA alone, we're projecting that we're looking at about $250,000 savings just in the energy we spend on that. I alluded to the fact that we're also service providers. As part of our partnership with PPG, we actually ended up tabling and providing a green cleaning program to all part of the PPG members. So if anybody's interested in initiating and having an audit conducted on their facilities to in effect understand what's actually happening from a cleaning perspective, that's a program that we actually ended up developing in conjunction with Diversity, one of our vendor partners, and PPG. Had to get that one thrown in, right? I think the thing that I found most important about my involvement here, though, has been the opportunity to network with some of these people. I mean, I've known Robert now since before my PPG days, actually, and in fact I think I introduced you to the group. Brad has been somebody who, I just managed to end up meeting with him the last couple of years, but quite frankly, when he alluded to the hydrogen lift truck fuel cell concept, when he initially had proposed that out there and engaged some people to see what their level of interest was, we jumped all over that, and we had some people sitting down with their folks and are very interested in engaging with that kind of stuff. The real benefit that we get out of this is that there's a whole range of people who are participating in Partners in Project Green through various levels of initiatives. Some who are really just starting, others who are very, very advanced in their programs. And it's really by sharing those various ideas that you can advance your own agendas. So that's really been the big benefit through it.
Great, thank you. Robert, you're a member of the Sustainable Logistics Consortium. Maybe you can tell us a bit about how that program's aiding your sustainability journey.
Yes, actually, we've just joined probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and already we've seen a lot of opportunities for improvement and great learning opportunities. And I think what it really does is that it accelerates your learning, and it puts you in touch with obviously people that have been there before, have looked at the same issues, because very often you're not alone, facing a certain sustainability challenge. And by networking with the rest of the group, what it allows you to do is actually very often see not just prototypes, not just solutions that are being tested, but people that have actually been successful in developing and implementing solutions. So there's nothing like bringing a colleague. I can talk until I'm blue in the face about possible solution on the sustainability front, and they're going to look at me just as another colleague, and they're just going to probably get on to their daily work. But if I can convince them to come with me to visit a member of the consortium, visit their facility, tour their facility, and look at the solution that has been implemented, they're going to be convinced on the spot because they talk to the individual who's gone through the same sort of mental process. They've seen it implemented, they see the solutions, and they actually hear about the benefits on the economic side and on the environmental side very often. So I think it's probably the strongest argument that you can ever have is sort of a real life demonstration of the feasibility of something. And that's what it does for us.
Oh, thank you. Brad, you've been around for a while. You're both a long-term member of Partners in Project Green, of course, and you sit on the board of the Sustainable Logistics Consortium. Maybe you could just tell us a bit about what role that relationship has played for you in Canadian Tire, and what do you see the future holds?
Okay, thank you. I think initially my involvement with Partners in Project Green was almost overwhelming. In my first 4 or 5 months involved there was just really gaining knowledge, really just listening to everybody talk about what they were doing and what Partners in Project Green was trying to accomplish. That sort of changed to really witnessing some very inspiring vision. To Andrew's point, a number of companies who are involved in those efforts are well along the way of sustainability. They've got lots of great ideas. They've got momentum. And I talked to you a little bit about Canadian Tire and its strategy and moving forward. But to actually see companies who have great vision about how they can integrate sustainability and sustainability concepts into their business and make it work was absolutely awe-inspiring. So that then changed to starting to generate some internal applications for Canadian Tire. So how can I take some of these great ideas or practices that these companies have undertaken and make it work in my environment and for my company? So we started to generate a number of ideas. And the opportunity to share successes and failures with that group is immense. I mean, we all like to talk about our successes, but frankly, our failures are more important. The lessons we learn from our failures are far more important. And I hate to be selfish, but isn't it great to talk to somebody who tells you, well, this didn't work because I did this or this happened, and you can avoid doing that. You can implement that same idea or same application and avoid those pitfalls. It's a wonderful thing. So that's certainly what the role has given me. The networking opportunity that Andrew talked about has been terrific. and I'm looking forward to more of that. I think in terms of the future, what I see, particularly in the Sustainable Logistics Consortium, what I see is the members helping each other implement their ideas. Not just talking about this is what I've done and this is how I did it, but actually getting together and saying, I understand what you're trying to do, and now I'm getting an idea of what your challenges are. Why don't you try this? Try it that way. Or maybe we go and talk to another logistics consortium member, because I know that they've had the same similar experience. So really, it's taking just the networking and just the talking more to actually having a source of help for implementing, and that's what I see in the future for us.
Thank you. No, I just wanted, before we go to questions, just to mention too, Chris, when Chris came to me, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, first talked to me, and I thought, oh yeah, that's nice sustainability, who cares? Anyway, to be frankly honest, the greatest thing I ever did for SEL, I hooked up with Chris, and our first event was out at the firefighting station at Pearson Airport, and what a fascinating night. We had a huge attendance despite the snowstorm. I guess they all wanted to eat the food and drink or something, but the most fascinating part was everybody come up to me and said, Bob, we got to learn more about this. We need to work with these people and learn more. And this is, you know, one of our focuses tonight was to have 3 of the leaders in the industry talking about what their company is doing, and really to explain a little more the partners of Project Green and SEL, how we want to work together to make sure our supply chain members across the country are doing the right thing. So, Chris, I wanted to thank you for that. And before we go to questions, I'd just like to thank our panel. I thought it was really great answers. We have a microphone right here. If you'd like to come up and ask a question, you know, you're more than welcome to.
So I'd like to start by thanking you all. That was a great experience for me to hear what your different companies are doing. So thank you for that. But I was also just wondering a little bit more about third-party certification. Brad, you were talking about how it's important for you to look beyond your 4 walls. And Andrew, you mentioned you're looking more about your GHG emissions and doing all of that. And I imagine that you've got some of those initiatives as well. So I'm just kind of wondering, has third-party certification like ISO, like the GHG protocol, like anything of those sorts really come into play? And how are you utilizing those for both your internal operations and communicating that to your stakeholders?
So we do refer to these standards, and I think more and more, you know, these are sort of a way to get credibility behind our efforts, and it's sometimes hard to pick the right ones. But I think as the sustainability movement matures, there seems to be, you know, clear, you know, standards that are emerging as the key reference. Obviously, on the building side, we've adopted LEED. There's probably flaws in the LEED model. It's probably not perfect, but I think it's probably the best that's out there, so we've adopted that. On the paper front, not that Canada Post has any interest in paper whatsoever, but we obviously we select most of our paper as FSC certified, but we also do recognize SFI as a standard, and greenhouse gas protocol, obviously, when we do our greenhouse gas calculations, and obviously on the reporting side, if any of you are familiar with sustainability reporting, is the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, and we follow that obviously when we report transparently on our performance on the social, environmental, and economic side. So these are the ones that come to mind right now as sort of the key standards that we use.
I don't have anything to add to that, right?
Certainly, if I add to Robert's point, we're reporting our GHG emissions and our GHG avoidance, so we're obviously using those protocols. We're reporting them publicly, so they're available for scrutiny. And secondly, internally, I am looking to put together an environmental management system that would allow our supply chain facilities to self-declare ISO 14001, and then hopefully in the future actually get certified. My view there is that I really want to use that more as a benchmark, and to understand what other companies who are ISO 14001 are doing, and to be able to continually benchmark ourselves against an international standard.
Thank you.
Thank you. If no one has a... John?
Very interesting conversation, gentlemen. My name is John Dahlbeck, and your company, an organization called Transalt Ontario. But Andrew mentioned in the course of his remarks, used the phrase avoiding greenwashing, I think was the term. But anyway, I'm just interested philosophically how you guys would define greenwashing. And where I'm going with this question is I had a conversation some months back with someone who I thought was, shall I say, environmental extremist, a zealot. And not that we're all concerned about the environment, this person is sort of going in an opposite extreme direction. But the individual was not criticizing what a company was doing, but was criticizing that the company was motivated by greenwashing. And from my perspective, I'm a more practical oriented kind of guy. I don't really care what motivates someone as long as they're doing the right thing. But anyway, just elaborate on the term greenwashing. How would you differentiate the greenwashing from real concern about sustainability?
Well, I think, in fact, there's actually, as a frame of reference, there's a group out of Ottawa by the name of Terra Choice. They in fact end up running a program called Eco Logo in addition to doing a lot of consulting work. They have a guideline that they've issued over the past couple of years. It initially started out as the 6 sins of greenwashing. I think it's now up to the 7 sins. And they characterize various elements of I mean, quite frankly, it's overstatement, or for that matter, not having any substance to the statements that are being made. The challenge that we run into with regard to, I mean, we have a very, very broad product portfolio. I mean, although we're not in the retail environment, such as Canadian Tire, we are in the B2B environment, and I think we have probably a retail product portfolio that's equivalent to yours. I mean, we move over 75,000 SKUs a year. The challenge that we run into is that oftentimes manufacturers will either end up overstating the environmental benefits, or for that matter, try to put an environmental spin on something that they've been doing for years and years and years. What we look towards is we look typically for third-party certification wherever it's available that in effect provides comfort to ourselves and to our customers that it's not us who are certifying, or for that matter making the green statement, nor is it the manufacturer who is making the green statement. It's set by a set of standards that are publicly available, that are based in science, that anyone can objectively end up determining whether there are any particular merits with regards to them.
And just to add a bit to that, I find that the population in general is very environmentally literate, if I could say it that way. I think a lot of consumers are wary of environmental claims and are looking for evidence. And so I think there is a reputational risk for companies if they put out products or put out claims about their environmental performance that they can't substantiate. So I think in our organizations, I'm sure we take the credibility and the trust that people put in our organizations very seriously. And I think it's safer very often not to have a claim on a product rather than to have a claim that could be challenged and that we wouldn't be able to substantiate. So we try and avoid that as much as possible. And even on the reporting side, people reading sustainability reports are looking for more and more hard evidence to support your performance. So I'm sometimes quite surprised by the depth of the questions that I get on the sustainability front. Very often, I just can't answer the questions. They're very precise, very detailed questions. So I mean that can only be a good thing. But it is sometimes difficult to draw the line. How much of a claim is too much. But overall, I think prudence is probably the way to go. If when in doubt, just avoid even just talking about. But I do agree that third-party certification is extremely important. For your question, matches what you were saying before. I think both questions were sort of tied that way.
Can I just add to that for a second? See, I think what's one of the challenges that we're running into right now within the industry overall, as far as the certification standard issue, though, is that as important as it is to have science-based third-party standards that are out there, I think to some extent customers are becoming a little bit gun-shy because there's such an over-proliferation of third-party standards. And I would suggest that the vast majority of them are quite legitimate. But nonetheless, you never know which one to end up referring to. I mean, for instance, a given piece of paper that we might end up selling, might end up carrying an FSC standard. It may also end up being produced chlorine-free with renewable energy and have 100% post-consumer recycled content. So that's 4 standards that may end up existing on one sheet of paper.
Great question, John.
How do you trade off with alternative fuel in terms of profit of the company? And I have another question as well. You are also talking about the waste, managing the waste. Now you turn into zero. So if you kindly elaborate that how is it possible to, what do you do actually to make the waste zero? Okay. Thank you.
These are 2 really good questions. I wish I had some of my experts with me. On the fleet side, actually, I was having a conversation with our fleet manager recently, and what he was explaining actually is, you're absolutely right, alternative vehicles very often are a lot costlier than regular vehicles. What his approach for now is using some of the alternative vehicles that have been tested that are a lot cheaper. For example, for propane, we recently we're testing 10 propane-based Ford Transit Connects. And these are very cheap compared to fully electric Ford Transit Connect, for example. So we're investing in these sorts of alternative vehicles, and the savings that we have on those, we can invest then into more expensive alternative fuel vehicles. We're testing fully electric Ford Transit Connects, 10 of them, and they're probably 3 times the price of a regular vehicle. I don't have the exact figure, but it's it's quite expensive. You're absolutely right. It's too expensive for us to use them across our network at this point. We always have to try and find these solutions. So that was on your first question. I hope that answered your question. On your second question regarding zero waste, it's another very good question. The definition of zero waste, I think, is still being talked about in that special interest group. What does it actually mean? Is it 100%? Is it 95%? Is it 90% the landfill waste diversion? What would constitute zero waste? And I think the question is still unresolved, unless some folks in the back at HBS could help out on that question. I would probably leave it at that. That's sort of the definition portion. And on how that's actually achievable, actually, I think we're very lucky. In most areas in Canada, there's extremely good recycling streams, and I think it's achievable to reach somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% in some facilities where we can put a lot of efforts in having recycling streams for virtually all the products, from plastics to wood to paper to glass and metal and etc. So I think it's possible to achieve that. The difficulty for us at Canada Post is to achieve similar levels across the country. We have thousands of facilities across the country, large and small, and for our big processing plants, we can put a lot of energy into having the proper streams for waste and maximizing the recyclability of the waste. But in some other smaller facilities, we either lack the type of municipal recycling facilities or the money to be able to have a separate stream for every possible component. At some point, we have to draw the line and say, listen, there's no use sending a truck at a small post office that employs 2 individuals
to pick up, 3 cans of Coke a week. It's just not, economically viable to do that. So we do have to make, decisions along the way. And our overall average across the country right now is approximately 60%. But it varies greatly by region, by facilities. We have some facilities that are in the upper 80s, and we have some facilities that are in the 20s. Simply because either we don't have proper data to assess exactly what gets recycled, or they're not big enough to justify the investment, or the municipality doesn't have that sort of recycling in place. So it's a challenge for us to have the same sort of standard throughout the network.
Thank you. Question away in the back there?
My question has to do more about productivity. As all businesses are challenged as to how do you get more productive. That is, with your existing workforce, we're always looking at how do we get more productive with your existing workforce. And then secondly, how do you get the same amount of work done with a shrinking workforce? And thirdly, how do you even do more work with a shrinking workforce? All three of these. So we all deal with these issues in all of our businesses. And I kind of defer back to the comment you made about attrition. So I'm interested that as much as there are challenges for all of us, especially I would think it would be a challenge for a unionized government employee. So I'd like to hear some of your plans and strategies as to how you go about dealing with that attrition factor that you raised before, that average age of 49 years old.
What I would say there is that I'd probably reiterate some of the comments I made earlier. You're absolutely right. That's a big challenge for us, and I think it would be unacceptable for the union and for management if we were to say, tomorrow morning we're implementing a new system, new process, and we're actually going to let go of half of our staff and have these layoffs. I mean, legally, I guess with the collective agreements that we have, most of our employees have job security, and I think that's a value that's important for Canada Post, and I think that's something that management wants to continue to honor as a principle. But nothing keeps us from trying to, as you pointed out, be a lot more efficient and productive. And so this postal transformation in allowing us to consolidate the routes and improving the automation of our mail processing facility will allow us to capture some of this attrition over the next 7 years. So I don't have an exact figure of how, what our workforce is going to look like there, but I believe it's probably in the neighborhood of a 20% improvement or reduction in the workforce after all everything is said and done. But again, it's going to be done through retirement, and I think the existing employees are going to continue to have their job security through this transition. So it is a very difficult balancing act. You're absolutely right, and it's something that I think as a Crown Corporation, especially, we take our social mandate very seriously, and I think we want to work collaboratively with our unions to develop solutions that are both acceptable for us as a company, make economic sense, but also respect our unions' interests.
If I can add a comment to that, I think one of you're absolutely right. Productivity is always a concern for an operation, and it adds certain cost to the business. And I'm going to be corny here, but I'm going to talk about lean and green. So being able to take waste out of your processes and make it easier for your workers to do more work is a great tool for adding to productivity. And if you can do that from a green perspective, that also will add to productivity. An example I could give you: if you can reduce your inbound raw material so that your outbound waste is less, then you're going to reduce the effort it takes to take care of that waste. And in my industry, that would be packaging. If I can reduce the inbound packaging, and how the consumer unit is packaged or multi-packed in a container, if I can reduce that, then the guy who has to manage all that cardboard waste, maybe I don't need 2 of them anymore. Maybe eventually I only need 1. And so I've just become more productive. Now I have 1 employee who can do more work. So it's tying the 2 together that can help you achieve that end. I talked about my hydrogen fuel cell project. The big advantage from an operation, in terms of a retrofit operation, is productivity. It takes less time to fuel a fuel cell than it does to change a battery, substantially of less time. However, even with that productivity gain, I still couldn't quite make the business case hurt. But those ideas, so taking something which appears to be green, or you think will have an impact on the environment, and also adding an impact to your operations productivity is helpful. And trying to try those 2, I think, is a trick that you're looking for.
Now, what I would say as well is it's about productivity, but it's also about the sort of the type of work. And in that case, I just wanted to mention that as well, because this change management exercise is extremely challenging from that perspective as well. We have extremely voluminous collective agreements, and we need to make sure we respect them, but at the same time we can't keep our business static. So we have to improve our productivity, and we have to have very engaged discussions with our unions in order to find common ground and find solutions that is, again, going to be acceptable for both.
Question for Brad, just on the whole hydrogen fuel cell thing you're working on. Comment sprung into my mind in terms of Jay Leno said that, and you probably heard this one, but the fact there's nothing wrong with the internal combustion engine. It's just the fuel source, fossil fuels. With the idea of hydrogen, do you see this as something you're working on right now? Is this going to be something that will be expanded through your facilities, your distribution centers, beyond just the tow motor?
Yes, I certainly hope so. There are opportunities there. The largest constraint right now in terms of using hydrogen to combust, and hopefully everybody knows that if you don't, I apologize for stating this if you do, but when you combust hydrogen, you produce water. So you burn hydrogen with oxygen, and all you get is water. There is absolutely no GHG emission whatsoever. However, the one constraint is you can't put enough hydrogen in a tank to get you the same sort of range that we're used to with fossil fuels. So right now, a hydrogen fuel cell car is getting about 300 miles. If you burn hydrogen in a truck, you can probably only get about 150 miles. The tank just gets too large. So the technology needs to change in terms of the storage. It needs to advance in terms of the storage of hydrogen to make it a little bit more practical. And then I think the cost will come down. But we are definitely looking at other opportunity outside of the lift trucks for either combusting hydrogen or placing fuel cells in other vehicles.
Thank you. Well, the way we designed tonight is this was our formal part of the evening, and we want you to network. See a lot of people in the back of the room that are here, some tables where you can learn a lot from HPS and Enbridge. Enbridge has a lot of great innovative new programs to help you. You can learn more about partners in Project Green. But the other thing that I really noticed tonight, and I hope all of you did too, industry has taken the lead. It's industry driving the bus to protect our environment and our children and our future generations. Here we are at a federal election campaign. Not one of them has mentioned the environment yet. And that's what we need to talk about when they come to our doors, is where's the environment in this discussion? If you think of it as Canadians, what's the most important things to us today? It's our economy, it's our health care, it's our education, and it's our environment. We need to get them focused. And I'm proud, Chris, of what initiatives your organization's been leading. All of these gentlemen and their companies are showing the way, and we do have a gift with them. You probably noticed the gifts here. The blue bag came from Stephen Harper, the
the green paper from Elizabeth Manley, the flowers from Jack Layton. The badges came from Mr. Ignatieff. Of course, the Bloc said nothing because they don't care about the rest of Canada. But you know, our environment is important. I've certainly learned as a man at my age. I learned from my children and my grandchildren. Our next generation, our youth, and our grandchildren in the future, we owe it to them to continue to do what these gentlemen and their companies are doing, and a lot of you are doing, is keep the environment in the forefront, protect our environment. Canada is a great country, a beautiful country, but we need to continue to improve our environment and have leaders that are a little more focused instead of worrying about a vote, whether that guy's got a red tie or I got a blue tie. Start worrying about what they can do. But I think what the best thing that's happened is that it's industry driving the bus. We don't need the government to drive the bus. They're better to get out of the way, but they should be facilitating the initiatives that we in industry can go to them and as citizens and ensure that we don't look like idiots on the world stage when it comes to Kyoto and climate change. We're not looking good. I can tell you because I go to meetings around the world, all of a sudden Canada is not seen as a clean country. And, we are in a lot of respects if you go to certain parts. But the reality is that's what we got to continue to do. So I want to thank all of you for being here. I also wanted to hope that you all come to our SCL annual conference on May the 9th and the 10th, or the 10th and 11th, because it's probably the best one we've had. And again, to Chris and partners in Project Green, that their leadership is great. It's just a pleasure to see, especially for those of us in supply chain management, to see our focus being on sustainability and protecting green initiatives, and they're great. So I wanted to thank all of you again. I'd like a round of applause for our panelists because they were